To be truthful, and this is the feeling I get from a lot of people, a Truth Commission will not work in Northern Ireland because it is too small. A lot of us know who were actually involved in the murder of our loved ones. Now, if somebody stands up and says they actually did it and were to face no type of justice, there is people who will take the law in their own hands, and there is people who will go out and kill the one who killed their father or killed their mother or whatever. That's the reality. This is not South Africa where you have millions of people. This is a small knit community. So a Truth Commission would be a disaster for Northern Ireland. Like, people say that, you know, you have to move on from that. How do you explain in history the date that you stopped having justice in Northern Ireland and the date you started it up again? In a democratic society, how would you ever explain that?
In the work that I do with Healing Through Remembering, for example, we've come up with 5 different initiatives to deal with the past, including looking at the whole area of truth recovery, to look at the whole idea of storytelling, of helping folk just to tell a personal narrative of what happened to them, to memorials. The one that I'm very closely involved in is this whole idea of building actually a museum to the Troubles, which would house a memorial where people, children, years after the conflict is over, can come and actually learn about what happened during those years and can learn the lessons from it. And the reason we would do all of this is to make sure that these things never happen again.
The whole idea of a living memorial centre is, we said right from the word go, we believe that we have enough memorial stones around the countryside with our loved ones' names on it. We wanted to create something that we could remember our people by, and whenever we move on, whenever we go, that their story will still be there, that their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren can come in and read about them. Because if they had been alive, the stories that they would have been passed down from grandfather to the grandson or the granddaughter, you know, children who never knew their relations want to know about them. So we believe that we must record the history of what went on. And I don't mean a sectarian history, I mean just an ordinary history. That Joe Bloggs, who was born in 1923, and basically a whole background where he was reared and all. And if he was killed, well, he was killed on a certain date, and what happened to the family after that. That gives the family the feeling, well, at least now we know that they're not going to be forgot, that is down in history, it's going to be recorded. And that sense of relief, and I don't know how I can express this strongly enough, but that sense of relief alone would mean a lot to people like myself and other victims that are involved for us. I'll give you a quick example. 1922, during the Troubles then, William Frazier from Newton Hamilton was taken off a lorry and kidnapped, shot dead, and dumped in a bog. Now, he was a far-out relation of mine. I knew nothing about him until I started looking into the history of my own family background. People do not want to see that happening again. I should have knew all about that man. I should have knew his family background, what happened to the young girl that was with him, his daughter, you know, how did she cope with living with that after that took place. Them is important things to us. And there's individuals who lived in our community who were never married because they were killed too young, their only sons and things like that. Their mother and fathers died off. But they were our friends, they went to school with us, they grew up with us. Who's going to remember them? So people like ourselves feel aggrieved that them people's history is not being recorded, and not being recorded properly, because nobody can record that except the people who knew them, and that is people like ourselves.
I think the question here of apology for us, victims and survivors in Northern Ireland, is quite a good one. I think that the apologies have been offered before, though. I think we have to remember this. I mean, I think that the IRA have offered an apology. The Combined Loyalist Military Command, I think, were the first people to kind of offer an apology and to show remorse way back in '94, I think it was, or '95. And so the question for me is, well, how have they been received within the victims and survivor constituency? And I think, I mean, again, because victims and survivors are a very diverse group of people, there are some people that have said, well, yes, I welcome the fact that there's been an apology. I would be in that camp. I do welcome that there's been an apology. But there are others that would say, an apology is just not enough. And there's others that would question the way the apologies were offered. And so, for example, if you take the one from the Combined Loyalist Military Command, there's people there that say, well, actually, it actually lacked, sincerity, and so therefore it's not worth the paper it's written on. If you take the IRA one, where they offer an apology to all innocent victims of the conflict, but wouldn't offer an apology to security force members, and this is an organisation that would have always argued against a hierarchy of victims, but by the very fact that they offered that apology, and it was almost a two-tier apology, they introduced the notion of hierarchy. In other words, innocent victims are deserving of apology, but victims who were members of security forces aren't. So I think that the whole issue of apology is fraught with difficulty as well, very complex, but I don't think that we should just immediately dismiss it. I think it does have the potential for doing some good.
The evidence is there, but what is missing, in my opinion, is the lack of political will to deal with this issue, because it goes right to the heart of the British government's involvement in Ireland. For nearly 40 years they've told the world that they were peacekeepers, that they were holding the line between two warring factions, but in reality they were active participants in that war. So a formal statement would be part of the way. I mean, the British government has to at some stage grasp a nettle. They have to say what they were involved in terms of being active participants in the conflict. I can't see any other way out of that. Once they have released that statement saying, yes, we were combatants, we were in it up till our necks, that we were involved in assassinations, we were involved in killings, that frees the evidence up to come round to tell the truth about what happened in terms of issues of collusion or state murder. Because at the end of the day, if they don't, this is just going to go on and on and on, either through international court cases. We'll take them to Europe, the European Court of Human Rights. We'll take them till any court, any public arena, till we find out the truth.
The IRA still holds the right to use violence. That is something we need to hear loud and clear. Not playing with words, not fancy words which have double meanings. Quite simple. We no longer hold the right to use violence in the name of a united Ireland. It's quite straightforward. Them words will go a long way within our community to say that this thing is over, because the IRA have never given up that right. And of all the fancy talk about being on a peaceful path and all that there, that all sounds well and good. But we asked for them words, and we've been asking for 10 years, and they've never given them to us. And they know that them words would go a long way within our community of actually helping to heal the past.
I don't think it's as simple as to say that, the conflict in Ireland was all those terrorists out there, behaving badly and, reaping, violence and hurt on people. And so therefore, in terms of dealing with the past, all we need to do is to have them come forward, give an apology, and we can all move on. I think there were lots of other people that played a part in the conflict, and I think maybe it's up for each of us individually to ask ourselves, what part did we play, either in a small way, or in a much larger way. I mean, I think some of the institutions that I would want to see questioned would be the churches, for example. I mean, it certainly isn't the first time that I've sat through a sermon in a Protestant church where the sermon has been anti-Catholic, and I have sat and I have listened to that, and I think that there are people there with questions to answer. I would also suggest that the Northern Ireland Housing Executive maybe has a question to answer in terms of how they allowed the ghettoisation of Northern Ireland to happen in the late 60s and early 70s. And I think that individuals as well, I mean, regardless of whether you were just the kind of person that took an active part in the conflict, or the kind of person that said, you know what, that conflict has nothing to do with me, and so you didn't get involved at all, but you did nothing to stop it either. And I think a lot of people have a lot of questions to answer.